In 2012, he was actually named Canada's top angel investor. More importantly than all that, though, he believes that you can only keep what you can give away. Entrepreneur extraordinaire, Mr. Dan Martell.
Look at this. Look at this. Can I ask you guys all a big favor? Pull out your smartphone real high. I want to see it. You can't. I can see you. So, like some of you guys are still staring at me. Pull out your iPhone, your Android. God forbid a BlackBerry. Sorry to hear. Some of you have BlackBerry still. Could you guys take a photo? I'll do this for two reasons. One, I believe in a concept called living out loud. I'm actually going to take a pano. So you guys all take a photo of me doing the pano. So one, live out loud, inspire other people, tell your story. There's a lot of people that should be in this room that don't even know this room exists, and it's your opportunity to inspire them. Second reason I do that is so that I get a lot of photos of me on social media. You guys can borrow that trick if you want. Oh, we're going to have some fun. Normally, I get asked to speak on stages to help technology companies scale their products, raise venture capital, or service-based businesses that go from 2 to 10 million, this kind of no man's land in business. But today, I want to actually share something way more interesting and more powerful, and it is the power of believing in other people. You know, I really think that it comes down to three core things and the opportunity we all have. One is the moment where we identify these moments to actually extend that belief into somebody else. The other one is the messenger, which I want to share with you guys today. Why I believe each and every one of you have the gift to be that messenger. And three, the motivation, kind of how to think about those moments and your gift and the message and where it needs to come from to really have it land. You know, in 1896, there was a man named Henry that worked at his idol's factory, Thomas Edison. And one day, Thomas Edison was actually, touring all the factories, and Henry pulled him aside and said, "I want to show you something." And he showed him this thing called the quadricycle. And Thomas Edison stopped, looked at it, and said, "Keep it up." That man's last name was Ford. There's no successful person that I've ever met in my life that when I asked them, who was that person that believed in you? Who was that person? There we go. You guys know it. We all have it. We all have that individual that looked at us when we didn't even see it in ourselves that really extended that belief that they had in us in that moment. And it's physical, it's one-to-one, it's biological, it's human to human. You know, my story is no different. You know, when I was 8, I was diagnosed with ADHD. I thought I had a superpower. A lot of people said that I was going to have challenges. I grew up in a house where my mom was an alcoholic. My dad was in sales on the road 5 days a week. I was the second oldest of 4 kids. And from the point of being diagnosed, I really had issues at home and anger problems, and I acted out. And I learned later in many years of therapy that was because in acting out, my mom would call my dad, and she knew that he would have to come home if she couldn't handle me. And this kept going on for years and years, where I'd take these anger tantrums. And when I was 11, I went a little too far, and my mom called the police. And the police showed up, and I was in my room in a fit of rage, and she asked them to take me away, that she couldn't handle it anymore. And I remember the police escorted me out of the house. I got in the back of the cop car, and I woke up the next morning in a crisis center for the first time in my whole life outside of my home. Now, I got placed in a group home with this guy named Dave, and unfortunately for Dave, I was his first foster child. Dave was a 35-year-old man, never had any kids, and decided one day that he was going to be a foster parent, and he got me. And we went out I remember the first night, he went out for groceries, and he goes, "So, what do you eat?" I'm 11 years old. I said, "Oh, that's easy, Pop-Tarts and hot dogs." And he's like looking at me. I go, no, seriously, call my mom. Chocolate Pop-Tarts and hot dogs, it's all good. So he fills up, this grocery basket full, $200 worth of Pop-Tarts and hot dogs. Dave was trying to be like a brother, like a friend. He didn't understand how to be, and I took advantage of it. I mean, that was the first night. A couple weeks later, I convinced Dave that it might be a good idea for us to get a slingshot because there's an archery range and we could go bond together. by doing the slingshots in the archery range up the street. And 3 weeks after he got me this slingshot with these steel little pellets, he asked me why all the street lights were out on the whole street. And I was like, I know that kid. He lives at the top of the street. He was the one that busted all the street lights. Dave was kind of confused, but he always kind of forgave me. And then another time we were driving this place called Fundy, this campground, and we were going camping for the night. And on the way, I knew there was this store outside the city limits that sold fireworks, specifically Roman candles. And I said, Dave, wouldn't it be cool if tonight, while we had the fire, that we actually lit off some Roman candles? He's like, oh, I don't know. It's like, yeah, it'd be great. So we stopped, buys a dozen Roman candles. And that night we light off a couple, but I kind of pretend like I wasn't into it because I knew that if he didn't use them, he would hide them in the house. So about 3 months later, he leaves me at home while he's going to run some errands on a Saturday, and I scour the house for these Roman candles. Finally, I find them, and I set up shop in the living room. Literally, newspaper, and I figure if I cut off like a quarter of them and kind of seal it back up and put them away, he'll never know that I had them. So I'm sitting there with a candle, a pile of newspaper all around me in his living room, and a pile of Roman candle pieces, gunpowder, all over this living room. Yeah, and I'm proud of myself. Duct tape, everybody needs duct tape. Right, repackaging up these little knobs of Roman candles, and I turn around and I hit the candle right into the pile of gunpowder, and the thing takes off. And it's like 4th of July in his fucking living room with shots going all over the place, hitting the couch, hitting the bookshelf. And I remember Dave said there's this white fire extinguisher in the kitchen if there's ever an issue of fire. So I run into the kitchen, I grab this dinky little fire extinguisher, and I literally come back, spray it. 4 seconds later, it's empty. The fireworks didn't stop. And I'm sitting there, which felt like probably, an hour, was probably more like 12 minutes. Finally, the smoke kind of died out in the living room, and I realized I went too far. A little too far. So I went up to my room, packed my suitcase, and I ran away. 3 days later, the police find me at one of my best friend's house and drives me back to Dave's place. And I'm sitting in the back of the car, and the window is cracked a little bit, and I see the cop go up to Dave and explain that we have Dan in the back seat, and Dave starts getting emotional, and he just said, I can't take him back. I can't do this. I don't know. You're going to have to take him. So the second time in my life, I got asked to leave the house that I was living in. So from there, I got put in a group home. And I was 12 years old in this group home with guys that were 17, 18 years old that were, criminals that were essentially left in what's called open custody. And I was essentially being raised by people that probably were not teaching me the best life lessons. All right? This room was not represented in that group home. The beliefs and values were not shared. And, I spent a year there, and when I was 13, a little after my birthday, I got released. I rebuilt a little bit of relationship with my parents, and I got brought back to my home. And that year, 2 things happened. One, my parents got divorced, which I felt for the longest time was my fault. And 2, I get introduced to drugs. And at 13, my life spiraled out of control. I got in trouble with the law. By the time I was 15, I ended up in jail for 6 weeks. Got out, promised I would never do that again. New group of friends. That night, first night, back at it. It kept going crazy and crazy. I started dealing. I started spending time with guys that were twice my age. And then finally, my brother calls me and he goes, "You can't come home." I said, "Why?" He goes, "The cops are waiting for you. They know that you've been dealing and they're going to arrest you, so you got to leave." And I stole a car and I took off from Moncton, New Brunswick. And a day later, I was driving. I actually got lost, which is crazy. I was like, I'm going to go to Quebec. Can't even figure out my way out of the province. Didn't have a driver's license. And I'm driving drunk and high in this place called Sussex, New Brunswick. And as I come off the highway to get some gas, there's a roadblock. And I pull up. I don't have my driver's license, stolen car. And I go, I don't know what to do. And I realized before I stole the car, all I knew is I didn't want to go back to jail. And I had a gun in a bag sitting next to the car. So I pull out and the cop says license and registration. I said, here's the registration and the insurance. I don't have my license on me. I apologize. It's back at home. He says, no problem. Pull over to the side. As soon as he's turned his back, I take off. cruising down the highway, and all I figure is if I can get to the woods and run into the woods, I can make it, I can get away. And I'm coming around this neighborhood, and all of a sudden I see this house and the garage door is open, and I'm coming around the corner way too fast, try to make it in the garage door, smash into the side of the house, and I go to reach for the gun. So I knew I couldn't do it myself. I was going to pull the gun and let the cops do their job. And I'm sitting there and I'm pulling on the gun, pulling on the bag. It's stuck between the handle and it doesn't come out. And before I know it, the cops open the door. My feet don't even touch the ground. They throw me in the back of the cop car, and I wake up the next morning sober in a jail cell, realizing that somebody was looking out for me. And I didn't know what I was looking at. I didn't know if I was going to do 3-5 years in jail. I didn't know what was going to happen. All I said that if somebody helps me get through this moment, I'm committed to giving 100% of my life every day. I will never take it for granted. And I didn't know if I believed in a higher power. I didn't know what was going to happen. I just knew that if somebody helped me get through this, that I wouldn't waste a day. I then got sentenced to adult facility for the severity of my crimes. And I'm talking about like real jail, not juvenile detention, cell blocks, jail. And I got sentenced for almost 1.5 years, and I was there for about 3 months, and I was trying to do my best. I was doing my homework, I was doing everything, and then one day over breakfast, somebody reached for the coffee, said, "Who took the rest of the fucking coffee?" And I said, and I knew I had to admit it because people were going to call me out, and I said, "I did." And Kurt stands up. I don't know if you knew these like teenagers that had like 8-packs when you were growing up. That was Kurt. I mean, just a fucking muscle. And next thing I know, we're in a fight, and the guards come in and grab us and throw us in the cell, and I spent 3 days in solitary confinement. It's probably the worst thing you could ever do to a human being. Strip them down naked, leave their underwears on, no mattress, no nothing, porcelain sink for 3 days, lights on, 23.5-hour days, locked up. And I was sitting in this jail cell wondering, what the fuck am I doing with my life? Because I was trying to do better. And one day, this guard, Brian, opens the door. And Brian was one of those guards that was just like super cool. Like was stern, was there, but you could just felt like he cared. And Brian says, "Come with me." And we're walking down the hallway. And we go past the cell block. And there's this corner guard unit that actually looks over across the 2 cell blocks. And it's the first time I'd ever seen the inside. I'd been there for 3 months. I'd never seen the inside of this room where all the guards kind of hung out while they were looking over. And he sits me in the corner, and he looks at me. And he says, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I stole a car and guns." And he goes, No. He goes, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I got in a fight with Kurt, and they locked me up." And he goes, No. "What are you doing?" I said, "I don't know." And Brian goes, "You don't belong here. I see the way you do your homework. I see how you're trying to stay out of trouble. And I want you to know, Dan, if you've never had anybody tell you this, that I believe in you." At 16 years old, that was the first time I ever had an adult look at me in the eyes and tell me that they believed in me and I didn't even see it myself. And he just kept going on about just the potential. And he's like, "You got to get out of here, man. You got to get to rehab. This doesn't make sense, Dan." And I committed to Brian that I was going to do everything I could. 2 months later, I get released at a place called Portage, New Brunswick. And I spend 11 months in rehab when most programs are 6 months. I had a lot of shit to work on. A lot of stuff. And it was during that 11-month stay, which I look back and say, man, I got 11 months of personal development. I mean, this place was an incredible location. I mean, all the peers, it was self-guided, it was peer-driven. I mean, it was in the middle of the woods on a lake where nobody would ever think of run away, because if you ran away and you're walking down that highway, all the local residents knew if you were a teenager, let them walk. And I was one of those teenagers, ran down the driveway, started walking. 4 hours later, I decided I might want to turn around. But it was during that stay, 17 years old, that I discovered at Portage there was this cabin that had a computer, this old 486 computer, and this yellowed book on Java programming. And I opened this book and I'm reading this code, this computer code, and it reads like English. And I turn on the computer and I get the prompt and I start loading up the java.exe and start reading this book, and I type in the command, and all of a sudden it says, "Hello world." I was like, fuck, I can program computers. This is crazy, this book, and you just follow it. You know, my life changed from that moment. I got out of rehab. I rebuilt the relationship with my family, my brothers. I lost a lot of trust with everybody. I changed schools. I ended up graduating with honors. I got introduced to a thing called the internet, kind of a big deal. Maybe you've heard of it. And since that moment, I've been just blessed and fortunate and privileged to have gone on and built 5 technology companies, hired over 500 people, raised millions in venture capital, invested in 30 crazy cool companies. And today I'm here to tell you that the reason I'm alive is because of Brian. We all have that power. And there's moments where you don't even realize, where you're sitting next to somebody and there's something you could say at the right time from the right place that's going to shift that person for the rest of your life, and you don't even know it. Brian had no clue the impact he had on me. You know, I remember I was really struggling in my business, and I reached out to a guy called Frank McKenna, and Frank was kind enough to introduce me. I mean, this guy was the prime minister of the province, and he introduced me to 3 guys that became my mentors. And those people, the way they talked to me and the language just changed everything. You know, and I really want to share one last story with everybody because I think it's going to help this concept land. In 2008, there was a swimmer called Joseph Schooling that met his hero, Michael Phelps, in Singapore as Michael was on his way to participate in the Olympics in Beijing. And he has a picture of him. You know, Joseph was 13 at the time. 4 years later in London, qualifying for the Olympics, Joseph had the privilege of racing in a race with his hero. And during that race, one of the judges called him out because his goggles were not Olympic standards, and he was rushing to try to find a new pair of goggles. And in that confusion, that frustration, he ended up doing really poorly and not making the semifinals. And as he was walking back to the locker room at the end of the heat, Michael Phelps was walking in front of him. He looked back, he saw Joseph, 17-year-old swimmer, and said, "What's wrong?" And Joseph tells him what happened. He says, "Dude, you're young. You have all the time in the world. Keep your head up high and keep moving forward." 4 years later, Joseph Schooling beats his hero's record in the 100-meter butterfly on August 13, 2016, becoming the first Singaporean to ever win a gold medal. The first person to swim over and congratulate him was Michael Phelps. Clap that up, man. When it comes from the right place, the motivation, Michael didn't do it for any other reason that he wanted to inspire a whole new generation of athletes and swimmers to go for it. And I just can't think of a better opportunity. There's 3 things I want you guys to remember. There's moments throughout your day. You are the messenger, the person, and you have to have the motivation to come from a place. Every day we sit next to somebody on a plane. We see somebody on the street, we walk by. We see 2 kids fighting. And I'm telling you, have the opportunity to extend that belief in them and their humanity and who they are when it comes from their soul to change their life. And you may never know about it, and it doesn't matter. Thanks for having me.